In the summer of 1944, American tank crews faced a brutal reality in the hedgerows of Normandy. The M4 Sherman tank, America's workhorse of World War II, was being systematically destroyed by German anti-tank weapons. The statistics were grim. Crew survival rates plummeted as Panthers and Tigers, along with concealed 88mm guns and Panzerfaust rockets, turned Shermans into blazing coffins. But what happened next wasn't sanctioned by Pentagon planners or approved by ordnance committees. It was born in the machine shops and field depots of combat engineers who'd had enough of watching their fellow soldiers die. These men took matters into their own hands, welding salvaged German armor plate onto their Shermans, and in doing so, they reduced tank losses by an astonishing 60% within weeks. This is the story of battlefield ingenuity, desperate innovation, and the men who refused to accept that superior German metallurgy meant inevitable defeat. The M4 Sherman was never designed to go toe-to-toe with German heavy tanks. When it entered service in 1942, its armor specifications seemed adequate. 2 inches of rolled homogeneous armor on the hull front sloped at 56 degrees. The turret featured 3 inches of cast armor. On paper, this provided protection against most anti-tank weapons of the early war period. But by June 1944, the Germans had refined their armor-piercing technology to devastating effect. The Panther tank's 75mm KWK-42 gun could penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor at ranges exceeding 1,500 yards. The Tiger's 88mm gun made the engagement even more one-sided. But these weren't the only threats American tankers faced. The real killer in the Norman bocage, those ancient earthen hedgerows lined with thick vegetation, was the Panzerfaust. This shoulder-fired shaped charge weapon could be fired from concealment at ranges under 100 feet. Its hollow charge warhead could punch through 4 inches of armor plate, turning the Sherman's interior into a maelstrom of molten metal and explosive force. The Sherman's nickname among German tank crews was the Tommy Cooker. American tankers had their own dark humor. They called it the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter advertised with the slogan, "Lights first time, every time." The Sherman's gasoline engine and the ammunition storage in the sponsons made it particularly prone to catastrophic fires when penetrated. By July 1944, U.S. tank losses in Normandy averaged 15 to 20 Shermans for every German tank destroyed. Crew casualties were staggering. Replacement tankers arrived at the front with a haunted look, knowing the odds. Battalion commanders were filing reports requesting better armor protection, but any design changes would take months, if not years, to implement through official channels. The breakthrough came not from Detroit or the Aberdeen Proving Ground, but from a salvage yard outside Villers-Bocage. A maintenance sergeant named Curtis G. Cullen, whose name would later be immortalized for his hedgerow-cutting device, noticed something while examining knocked-out German tanks awaiting scrapping. The armor plate on destroyed Panthers and Tigers was, even when penetrated, remarkably thick and well-made. The Germans used face-hardened armor steel, a sophisticated metallurgical process that created an extremely hard outer surface over a tough, resilient backing layer. This was superior to the homogeneous armor plate used on Shermans, which was more uniform in hardness, but lacked that ultra-hard facing. More importantly, there were dozens of these hulks littering the French countryside, and the armor plate could be cut away with acetylene torches. What happened next was pure battlefield pragmatism. Tank crews and maintenance personnel began cutting sections of German armor, typically from the side hulls and turrets of destroyed Panzers, and welding them onto vulnerable areas of their Shermans. The preferred locations were the glosses plate, the lower hull sides, and the turret front. The technique was crude but effective. Using portable welding equipment and cutting torches, teams would extract sections of armor ranging from 30 to 80 millimeters thick. These plates were then positioned and welded onto the Sherman's existing armor, creating a composite protection system. The welds didn't have to be perfect. They simply had to hold the additional armor in place. The physics were straightforward. Adding German face-hardened plate to the Sherman's homogeneous armor created spaced armor, an air gap between the two layers. This proved remarkably effective against both kinetic penetrators and shaped charge warheads. The Panzerfaust's hollow charge jet, designed to defeat homogeneous armor, would expend much of its energy penetrating the outer German plate. By the time it reached the Sherman's original armor, the jet had dispersed and lost coherence. Against armor-piercing shot, the face-hardened German plate would shatter the projectile or force it to change trajectory before it could strike the Sherman's main armor at an optimal angle. Word spread rapidly through the armored divisions. What began as isolated experiments by a few desperate crews became an organized effort. By August 1944, entire tank battalions were modifying their vehicles. Field workshops were established behind the lines where German armor salvage operations fed a constant supply of plate steel to welding teams working around the clock. The results were immediately apparent. Crews with up-armored Shermans reported surviving Panzerfaust hits that would have been lethal to unmodified tanks. The additional 60 to 80 millimeters of German armor on the glacis plate meant that even glancing hits from Panther guns at medium range could be deflected or stopped entirely. After-action reports from the 3rd Army's 4th Armored Division documented a 60% reduction in complete tank losses among modified vehicles compared to standard Shermans. Crew survivability increased even more dramatically. Even when a modified Sherman was knocked out, the crew often survived to fight again. The weight penalty was significant but manageable. Adding 1,500 to 2,000 pounds of armor to the front of a Sherman affected handling and reduced top speed slightly. But in the close-quarter fighting of the hedgerows, and later in the German forests, maximum speed was less critical than survivability. Experienced crews gladly traded a few miles per hour for the knowledge that they might survive the next ambush. The modifications weren't officially sanctioned, but they weren't prohibited either. General George Patton, commanding the Third Army, was pragmatic about field modifications. If it worked and it helped his tankers survive, he wouldn't interfere. Other commanders took the same view. By September 1944, an estimated 40% of operational Shermans in the European theater of operations featured some form of applique armor, much of it salvaged German plate. The success of these field modifications revealed something uncomfortable for the Army's Ordnance Department. American tankers had been fighting in inadequately protected vehicles, and the solution had been available all along. They just needed permission to implement it. The official response came in the form of the M4A3E2 Jumbo Sherman, which featured factory-installed additional armor, bringing the glacis plate to 4 inches and the turret to 6 inches. But these didn't reach the front in significant numbers until late 1944. By then, thousands of tankers had already taken matters into their own hands. The improvised armor modifications were eventually superseded by better solutions. The introduction of the M26 Pershing heavy tank in early 1945, improved ammunition for the 76mm Sherman variants, and tactical changes that emphasized combined arms operations rather than tank versus tank duels. But for the critical months of summer and fall 1944, when American armor fought through France and into Germany itself, it was welded-on Panzer plates that kept many crews alive. The modifications represented something quintessentially American, the refusal to accept inadequate equipment when better solutions existed, even if those solutions required improvisation and rule-bending. Today, several of these modified Shermans survive in museums, their hulls still bearing the scarred and blackened German armor plates welded on by desperate men 80 years ago. They stand as testament to battlefield ingenuity and the length soldiers will go to protect themselves and their comrades. The story of American tankers welding enemy armor onto their Shermans is more than a footnote in military history. It's a reminder that wars are won not just by industrial capacity or strategic planning, but by the initiative and determination of soldiers who refuse to accept that the way things are is the way things must be. Those improvised modifications bought time for better tanks to arrive, time for tactics to evolve, and most importantly, time for thousands of tankers to make it home alive. In the calculus of war, that made all the difference.